Let's go. Let's talk portal a little bit. So this is, I mean, Nebraska's making these hires when they are. The timing of this is in part because of portal recruiting. Nebraska's had about 20 guys enter this. We're recording this on a Wednesday morning. Nobody's come out on Nebraska's side yet, but it's only been open for a couple of days. A lot of visitors in there. Well, I guess I'll start with this, Sam. The real kind of headliner from the last few days was Emmett Johnson.
Yeah.
And he never technically went in the portal. He announced that he intended to go in, and then 3 days later decided not to. Is this, I mean, what was your take on kind of that particular situation? What does it mean for Nebraska to have him still in the fold?
I think it's a big retention. I was very skeptical going into the season about Nebraska's running back room, and remained that really until Holgorsen got there. And then I thought in the last 3 or 4 games they found a rhythm with Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdell as a 1-2 punch. Johnson doing some of the things he was doing, and then Dowdell coming in as kind of a hammer back. And I thought it was important to retain the both of them. And then Johnson went in the portal. There's obviously discussion about whether that was about money or that was about fit, so on and so forth. But the reality is I think all those things eventually aligned, and you have what I would consider a 1-2 punch. And Johnson's probably the better of the two and a little bit more suited for Holgorsen's offense. But Dowdell, I thought, started running the ball better in those last 3 games, and I thought he was very good against Iowa. I thought maybe at the end of that game they could have even run him just a little bit more because I thought Iowa's defense was softened up a little bit. But that's a great retention. You now get to have the 3 back can be Quentin Ives if he decides to stay, Mekhi Nelson, who I think he will stay, and then you have Jamarian Parker coming in, and I think that's a good room. I think that's a top – I'll be frank, I think it's a top 6 room in the Big Ten. And I wouldn't have obviously said that coming into the season. You wish Gabe Ervin well. I was never a big Ervin guy, and I hope he's able to find what he's able to find. And then I think Ramir Johnson obviously exhausting his eligibility. So I think it's a good room, and we'll see where it goes from here. I thought Jamari Butler. I think I understand the context of why he's leaving. It's understandable. He's going to end up somewhere in the South. And then, there's a couple other guys in there that are losses. I mean, Prince William, who I wrote about before the season. If people remember me writing about him and saying that the measurement of this staff isn't going to be whether, walk-on sack man gets better, because everybody was talking about James Williams or David Hoofkin, but whether Prince William gets better, because Prince Will is one of the most talented players. His older brother is probably going to be a first-round draft pick, maybe even a top 10 pick. And Princewill has that ability. He really does. And I just don't think he ever quite maximized it here. And I think it's also there might have been some frustration on Nebraska's end of whether he was doing all the things that he needed to do, and maybe he's going to find that somewhere else. I kind of understand why Williams is leaving, but those are losses. You have to now get players out of the portal to replace those 2 guys.
Keona Davis?
Yes. Umanyalan to me is easily the largest of those 3. Davis was a nice player. Curious what he was he didn't have Umanyalan's length or his first step. Curious to see what Keona Davis does and whether he puts on weight. But Umanyalan to me is the most talented of those 3 by some margin. But it just didn't coalesce here. And so those 3 guys leaving hurts. You've got to try to get guys out of the portal now, and then obviously the receiver position is a position where you have to replenish. You have to figure out, and then offensive tackle, and that's where you're going to have to pay the money.
You think they need
offensive tackle and edge rush are money positions?
Because you could still bring back Corcoran. You had Gunnar Gatula did a pretty good job out there. I mean, you lose Ben Hart. Is that a priority spot, do you think, for Nebraska in the portal? Tackle?
Well, if you want to roll the dice with very, very injury-prone tackles on the hopes that they don't get injured, you might be right. But there's my thought.
I mean, I just
have
think
2 players who have missed the bulk of 2 seasons with lower body injuries, that being Corcoran and Prohaska. It is very possible that they're done being hurt, and they come back and, voila. But one, I don't think one of those guys is really truly a tackle. I don't think Corcoran is truly that. I think he's an interior player. 2, I think you need – yes, I would add 2 tackles if it were me. We don't know what they have in Jacob Hood. We don't know if Jacob Hood's going to stick around. I think Grant – the kid from Oakland Craig, Grant Segrin, we'll see. And then you got Grant Bricks. Yes, I would add older tackles, and I think they'll probably pursue them. Of course, Corcoran's an option, but man, that's asking a lot of a guy that's hurt his feet. And when you hurt your feet, that's a big deal. So there's a lot of money on the offensive tackles and a lot of money on those edge rushers, and those are two positions they have to replenish, and they better be willing to pay. Because O'Shawn Mathis from a couple of years ago, as people recall, was not cheap.
Right. And
they're probably going to have to pay at least that to get a guy of comparable ability in here. And Mathis played a lot of snaps. He was not that bad of a player, and he got drafted into the NFL. But he wasn't great, and they need to find a guy that's at least that good, and it's going to probably cost them a pretty coin to get a player like that in here.
Yeah, if you're playing like fantasy football out of the portal, you can find a receiver. Those guys are more readily available. You can find linebackers. That's another position of need for Nebraska. It's going to be on those lines. That's where you got to pay. That's where those guys don't tend to be there, especially the defensive line. Tom, it's shopping season. What are your top maybe positions that you think Nebraska would need to hammer or find some help for out of the portal?
Oh, obviously I think the offensive line thing is good. I mean, I think it's going to supplement things right now, and this is going to become a common rule of the portal era, and that's you want to get old. You want teams that are older. The teams we saw that made runs this year, like Indiana, were older teams, and it's waiting to build a program is great. I think you can retain a lot of guys, but sometimes they're going to leave, and so can you really build a developmental program? It's a great question. But if you're Nebraska and you want to make a serious move next year, you need to get older. And the quarterback thing is set, right? And Dylan's going to be a year older, so hopefully we'll make some same mistakes that he made this year, which not that many, but certainly he made some. I just think the pass rusher is always an important thing. Rushing the passer, and then on the outside tackles, the tackle offensive line. I just think everywhere, but receiver will be big, and I'm really, right now Nebraska fans are kind of in the mode of watching guys leave, and there's the daily panic, the daily depression of this guy's gone and this guy's gone. What we haven't seen yet is the free agency rush coming here, and that's going to be fascinating with Holgorsen. And I mean, he's already chomping at the bit. I mean, this is really a good fit to have him as a coordinator, because he didn't have to be the head coach, and he can't. He said we're going to bring in 20 or 30 guys. I mean, he's already said that. So he's got plans. I'm anxious to see the people that they bring in, but I think receivers. Maybe they'll find a running back that they have to have. I mean, you can find anything out there. Another interesting question, Evan, is what do we think about Heinrich Haarberg? Is he going to be a quarterback next year? And if he's not, who's the backup?
For sure.
You need to get a backup if he's not the quarterback. Now he could play quarterback, right? And I assume that's a reason when Daniel Kalo left, they kind of saw Haarberg as the number 2. But what's if he's not a quarterback? What if he's some other kind of guy? H-back, tight end, maybe on defense. Would he move to defense? I think with his speed, you could probably put him anywhere. But that's an interesting question. But I like having Holgorsen there making those decisions.
Yeah, where do you slot quarterback in there, Sam? You have your starter, but if Harburg is not a full-time quarterback or making a transition or whatever, where do you go?
I'd try to re-recruit Danny Kalen out of the portal, and if they're not able to do that, then I think that becomes a higher priority, because unless you feel really good about TJ Lateef being your backup, and maybe you do, I think Heinrich Harburg is going to be given an opportunity to explore his athleticism on the field to a greater extent than he has so far. Now, that may mean he's playing a little bit of Wildcat quarterback, but I think he's going to be given an opportunity to, improve his NFL opportunities. Taysom Hill level thing. I don't know. Taysom Hill is a different player than Heinrich in terms of their size and whatever they do, but I think they're trying to give him an opportunity, and in doing that, they need to find a third quarterback. Is that Jalen Gramstad? Can he come in and do that? Is TJ Lateef going to be the guy that comes in and does that? I think Lateef's got some ability, but I don't know if he's going to be ready. Can you re-recruit Kalen out of the portal? Or is Danny looking at the situation and saying, you know what, guys, Dylan's going to be here at least 3, and he might be here 4 years, and I'm not going to beat that guy out. And so maybe he feels like he's got to go because, he's only going to have 1 year ahead of Lateef. So there's lots of different things to consider there.
What's your pitch for bringing Kalen out of the portal? Because he went in kind of knowing the situation. So what's really changed for him since he went in? Like, how do you bring him back?
It just kind of depends on whether he's able to find a spot where he thinks he can compete for the starting job right away at a Power 4 school. Now, he may decide, let's see if he ends up at UCF. That's the start. That'd be the starting conversation.
Okay.
Do Scott Frost and his quarterbacks coach, Mackenzie Milton, think that Danny is good enough to go down there and play early? It may be. So I would rank Danny above Noah Vedral as a passer and as like a manager of the pocket. Now, he's not the athlete that Noah was, but I would rank Danny up there in terms of his skill set. Is Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton interested in taking Danny Kalen? I think that would probably be a starting conversation. Is Scott Frost going to be interested in coming up here and recruiting? I think he might be. You just never know. At least that position. So is Scott Frost interested in Zane Flores at Oklahoma State? Like, there's going to be some things now that Frost is back in the mix where he's going to be recruiting in the Midwest, because I think he'll probably have a slight Midwestern flavor on his staff. So, those are questions to examine. I don't know. There's going to be guys that they can go out there and get, but the guy's got to be really understanding of, I'm going there to basically be a backup. Now, right. I thought maybe it'd be interesting if Chuba Purdy wanted to come back to Nebraska, knowing he wasn't going to start. Chuba's going to stay at Nevada.
Yep.
And I don't know if Chuba's going to start there either. But, there might have been an opportunity for Chuba to come here. There might be some other players that might be interested in coming back here. You just never really know. It's a real question. What I know is that Nebraska's offense has to get – we're going to talk a lot about defense tomorrow when Matt Rule meets with the media, because we're reactive, and that's fine. The story of this team going into next season is the defense is unlikely to be as good, so the offense better be a hell of a lot better if you want to go where you want to go. With the schedule that they're going to have, and it's not terribly hard, but at Penn State, Michigan here, some of the, at Minnesota's no joke. Nebraska hasn't won there in, 10 years. So, if you want to go where you want to go next season, year 3 jump looks like 8 or 9 wins or even 10, your offense has to get a hell of a lot better. And that means that every position has to get better, including Dylan, but also the pieces around him have to improve. And that means recruiting whoever you have to give him the tools that he needs.